My name is Tomo Kikuchi. I'm the Senior Research Fellow in the Center on Asian Globalization in the school, LKY School of Public Policy. Welcome to the Hon Siew Ching speaker series. I have to make an important announcement that this series was made possible by the donation from Mr. Tae Lim Wee, former CEO and Group Managing Director since the award in July 2009. Today we are delighted to have Dr. Yoichi Nemoto to speak on us on development of macroeconomic surveillance in ASEAN+3, China, Japan, Korea, framework, lessons the region has learned from financial crises. So it's plural, so I think he's not just referring to the Asian financial crisis in '97, but also lessons drawn from the recent crisis, 2007. Dr. Nemoto is director of Amro. Amro stands for ASEAN+3 Macroeconomic Research Office, which is headquartered in Singapore and mainly in charge of macroeconomic surveillance. Prior to becoming the director of Amro, he has a long, distinguished career in the government of Japan. He has worked for 28 years in Ministry of Finance. And during that time, he was also chair of the Chiang Mai Initiative Working Group of ASEAN+3. So this is an initiative that prior to Chiang Mai Initiative becoming Amro. And I just heard that Amro is now in the process of becoming international organization. So this is a very important work in Asia. Amro basically functions like the European stability mechanism. And in the normal times, we may not pay so much attention to these organizations, but when crisis hit, it is an important mechanism. So Dr. Nemoto has a Bachelor of Law from Tokyo University, as many other distinguished Japanese government officials. He has a master's in public policy from actually Kennedy School, which is our partner university. And he has a PhD in public policy also from Harvard University. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Nemoto.
Thank you, Kikuchi-san, for excellent introduction. It is an honor to be invited to LKY School of Public Policy to share my views on ASEAN+3 financial cooperation in the last decade. Since its establishment in 2004, LKY School has emerged as the most prominent school of choice to study public policy in East Asia. And as Kikuchi-san explained, I was a student of Kennedy School almost 30 years ago, so it is a great privilege to be here to speak to the current and future generation of leaders. I was also visiting fellow at Princeton University's Wilson School about 13, 14 years ago. And in 2002, Wilson School also asked me that I speak on the regional financial cooperation in East Asia. And thus, this is a topic close to my heart, and I am very pleased to be giving a speech today on the development of regional financial cooperation since then. Before I begin, I would like to state that the findings, interpretations, and conclusions expressed in my speech represent my personal views and are not necessarily those of our office or its member authorities. Neither the ASEAN+ Macroeconomic Research Office nor its member authorities shall be held responsible for any consequences of the use of the information contained in my speech. The reason for my saying this is that our office has not yet become an international organization, as Kikuchi-san explained. Thus, our capacity is limited. For your information, will become an international organization in very near future, as our member economies are going through their respective domestic ratification process, even as I speak. Our office is the regional macroeconomic surveillance unit of the Chiang Mai Initiative Multilateralization of ASEAN+3 members. I call it CMIM from now on. And our office was established in Singapore as a company in April 2011, following the agreement by ASEAN+3 finance ministers to set up an independent regional surveillance unit to promote objective economic monitoring in 2009. The CMIM is a multilateral swap arrangement among ASEAN+3 members, which became effective in March 2010, having developed from the Chiang Mai Initiative Bilateral Swap Network. As Kikuchi-san explained, the former form is the 16 bilateral swap arrangement, and after 2010, it's become a single agreement. And Amro and the CMIM are direct products of ASEAN+3 financial cooperation and were born from the lessons the region had learned from the financial crisis, namely the Asian financial crisis and the global financial crisis. My remarks today will be on the genesis and evolution of macroeconomic surveillance in the region and its relationship with the Chiang Mai framework. I will also discuss the relationship between global and regional frameworks and how recent events have led to a change in the way of thinking about the global financial architecture. It is impossible to discuss ASEAN+3 financial cooperation without discussing the impact of the 1997 Asian financial crisis on regional authorities. To be brief, the Asian financial crisis was sparked with the devaluation of Thai baht in July of 1997, followed by speculation against the currencies of neighboring countries, namely Indonesia, Malaysia, and Korea. Among these countries, Indonesia, Thailand, Korea subsequently requested for IMF-supported programs. As it is widely known, the high social and economic costs which ensued left a deep scar and negatively impacted relationship with the IMF. In September 1997, after 2 months after the broke of this Asian financial crisis, Japan proposed to establish an Asian monetary fund comprising Australia, China, Hong Kong SAR, Indonesia, Japan, Korea, Malaysia, the Philippines, Singapore, and Thailand to serve as a regional currency crisis prevention fund. However, the proposal was not supported by the US and the IMF. I imagine that they wanted to preserve the centrality of the global financial framework and were also concerned that the more decentralized global financial architecture would lead to easier money with weaker conditionality for borrowing countries and therefore undercut IMF so-called conditionality. As a result, the proposal for an Asian monetary fund did not take off, though the thrust of the proposal, that is, the desirability of regional mutual support frameworks against the reoccurrence of current crisis, survived. 3 years later, we can say that the Chiang Mai Initiative was created from the lessons learned during the Asian financial crisis, namely, 1, regional support systems had to be put in place well in advance in peacetime, and 2, the risk of moral hazard had to be minimized, ideally through the mechanism itself. It is true that there were certain shortcomings in the Chiang Mai Initiative, especially early stage since 2001, but they were gradually remedied over the years. As I briefly mentioned, in May 2000, ASEAN+3 means ASEAN, China, Japan, and Korea, finance ministers gathered in Chiang Mai, Thailand, and announced the creation of a network of bilateral currency arrangements in order to strengthen regional self-help and support mechanism. This network of bilateral currency swap agreements came to be known as the Chiang Mai Initiative, and its aim was to, 1, address short-term liquidity difficulties in the region, and 2, supplement the existing international financial arrangements. In 2005, it was announced that ASEAN+3 economic surveillance would be integrated and enhanced into the Chiang Mai framework to enable the early detection of irregularities and swift remedial policy actions with a view to develop effective regional surveillance capability, which would complement the existing framework of international financial institutions. To put it differently, prior to 2005, there was no link in discussions on the provision of financial support under the Chiang Mai Initiative framework and economic surveillance. The recognition that such a link was needed in order to prevent moral hazard. Also in 2005, ASEAN+3 finance ministers initiated a study of the Chiang Mai Initiative multilateralization, that is to shift from a single agreement instead of network agreements. I think you have a handout on your table, and a bit difficult, but before 2009, the form was this one. So the Chiang Mai was a network actually of 16 bilateral contracts. And as I explained later, after 2009, it is only one single agreement. So in order to cope with crisis, the 16 bilateral swaps are difficult to manage. So in 2009, they agreed to make this into a single contract. In 2006, they announced the adoption of collective decision-making procedure to ensure the effective activation of this Chiang Mai Initiative swap network, which comprised of 16 bilateral swaps then, as I explained. In that year, ASEAN+3 finance ministers also instructed that the regional surveillance capacities were to be enhanced. This collective decision-making procedure is the how decision-making of the 16 swaps can be jointly made. So it is, I can say it is a step forward single agreement. Let me turn to the lessons we learned from the global financial crisis. When the global financial crisis struck in 2008, no bilateral swap agreements were activated, even though some ASEAN+3 members had concluded bilateral swap arrangements lines with the US Federal Reserve, which offered these in fall of 2008. The Lehman collapse was September 2008, and those Fed swap lines were concluded in the autumn of 2008. Also, no ASEAN+3 member requested for the IMF's financial assistance program, such as the standby arrangement or flexible credit line. Flexible credit line is a crisis prevention facility which was established in spring of 2009. It was during this period of great economic uncertainty that ASEAN+3 finance ministers gathered in Thailand in February 2009. It was 5 months since the outbreak of the Lehman Brothers collapse. There, they, one, reaffirmed their commitment to the single contract. So they decided they accepted their work to this contract. And two, announced an independent regional surveillance unit would be established to monitor and analyze regional economies and support this CMIM. Thus, the crisis again accelerated the work of the regional authorities to enhance the regional financial safety net. This CMIM came into effect 1 year later, March 2010, and also 2 years later, our office was established in Singapore in April 2011, as I explained maybe 5 minutes ago. The establishment of this CMIM and Amro represent a significant milestone in ASEAN+3 financial cooperation and illustrated two important components which deserve to be highlighted. One, emphasis on economic surveillance. Our office was established with the purpose of monitoring and assessing macroeconomic status and the financial soundness. And number two, contributing to the early detection of risks, ensuring the swift implementation of remedial actions, and assisting in the effective decision-making of this CMIM. Two, importance of multilateralization. This reflected the recognition of the shortcomings of the networks of 16 bilateral swap arrangements, in particular, the feasibility of activation during times of crisis in view of the different terms and conditions of each bilateral swap agreement. Considering the commonly observed the slow pace of decision-making in this region, due to the diversity of views and interests. I would say the development of this CMIM and Amro unfold relatively quickly. It is important to note two things. Number one, this came about in the midst of the global financial crisis and European crisis, which reinforced the region's commitment to develop its own regional arrangement and surveillance unit to enhance its own self-reliance. And two, ASEAN+3, as I long explained, had started this preparation since 2005. In fact, ASEAN+3's commitment to self-reliance and Amro's objectivity is enshrined in Amro Agreement, Article 2. Amro Agreement means that the agreement of our becoming an international organization. The purpose of Amro is contribute to securing the economic and financial stability of the region through conducting regional economic surveillance and supporting the implementation of the regional financial arrangement. Also, Operation Clause states that Amro, independently and without undue influence of any member, shall prepare such reports as deems desirable in carrying out its purpose and functions, and communicate its views informally and confidentially to any member on any matters arising under this agreement that may affect such member. Having laid out the genesis and evolution of macroeconomic surveillance in the region, let me move to discuss our challenges. Today, I will talk about the relationship between the global and regional frameworks and what this means for the global financial architecture in the future. As I mentioned earlier, the US and the IMF had opposed Japan's proposal of an Asian monetary fund back in 1997. The recent and unfortunately ongoing European crisis served as a turning point in how policymakers around the world view the relationship between the global and regional framework. The European crisis started from the problem of data reporting by Greece. This led to a serious deterioration of market confidence in the fiscal sustainability of Greece, and contagion spread to other countries in the euro area. To restore market confidence, euro area members sought the IMF's participation in the rescue package for Greece and some other members who are in trouble. The involvement of the IMF gave rise to the so-called Troika, which comprises the ECB, EC, and IMF, as the importance of coordination between region and global frameworks became a priority. The ESM, the Kikuchi-san introduced in the outset, is the financing supporting mechanism of this Troika. European Stability Mechanism is our regional counterpart in the Europe to support this mechanism. In my view, the reason Europe sought the IMF's participation was not because Europe did not have the financial resources or the organization capacity to solve the issue. Rather, they needed global credibility in order to restore market confidence. The European crisis demonstrated the need for regional crisis prevention and crisis resolution mechanism to be in place before a crisis strikes. It also underscored the need to strengthen surveillance and monitoring of the regional financial markets, as well as to enhance data adequacy and banking soundness supervision frameworks. These lessons were well noted by ASEAN+3, and as a matter of fact, in 2012, they agreed to further strengthen this CMIM as a part of the regional financial safety net by, one, doubling the size from 120 billion USD to 240 billion USD, two, increasing the IMF delinked portion from 20 to 30%, three, introducing a crisis prevention facility. They also emphasize the importance of strengthening our role as an independent regional surveillance unit and encouraged us to further enhance collaboration with relevant international financial institutions, such as the IMF. Although the IMF had opposed the establishment of a strong regional initiative back in 1997, through the experience from the European crisis, I think the IMF is now keen to establish a close cooperative relationship with regional financial arrangements. The IMF has also recognized that the regional surveillance contributes to global economic stability, and this has fostered closer ties between the global and regional frameworks. A noteworthy indication of this change is evident in the endorsement of the use of regional financial arrangement as a part of the global financial architecture by the IMF and G20. In a sense, Amro is fortunate that it was established as the European crisis was unfolding, and that there was a greater willingness on the part of the global framework to cooperate with the regional frameworks. In fact, despite the critical situation in Europe, both the EFS is a former institution before the ESM, EFS and ESM have been forthcoming in helping us to improve our organization through the exchange of best practices. For example, if Amro had been established a decade earlier, like the idea of the Asian Monetary Fund, it might have faced stronger opposition and would not have gotten the support from the regional peers. While the acceptance of regional frameworks into the global financial architecture is a significant milestone, the inherent challenge of integrating the various frameworks, bilateral, regional, and global, in a more decentralized world remains. Thus far, the global conversation has been on broad, non-binding tentative principles and guidelines. Important questions such as how to coordinate surveillance and the multi-layered financial safety nets need to be answered. It is by accident, but last night the IMF Managing Director Lagarde expressed in her speech that she made the exact same argument that the coordination among those multilateral layers have to be strengthened in order to have a more stable global financial architecture. Indeed, the European crisis has reminded us of the importance of ensuring good coordination among the different layers of financial safety nets in order to effectively cope with crises and ensure adequate firepower. This is a near-term challenge for the CMIM and our office. CMIM and our office will also have other challenges going forward. I would like to mention 4 major challenges today. The first one revolves around the subject of how to ensure institutional memory of the CMIM. Currently, the CMIM has no permanent secretary. Instead, the so-called co-chairs, one selected from the China, Japan, Korea, and the other selected from 10 ASEAN countries, are expected to function as the secretariat for this CMIM's operations. The co-chairs change every year, rotating in alphabetical order within the ASEAN group. One issue I would like to point out regarding this current system of annual rotation of the co-chairs is difficulty in preserving institutional memory. The current system could place a too heavy workload on the shoulders of co-chairs. Members could consider entrusting the institutional memory function to a certain organization which comprises a group of experts who have sufficient professional knowledge and experience in the area of the CMIM, international monetary system, and the other related fields. Our office is willing to accept such a role if CMI members so decide. The second challenge is about expanding the scope of business of our office. While great efforts have been made to improve the quality of our surveillance products during the last 4 years, there is still room for further improvement. During the course of our surveillance activities in the last 4 years, we have observed that improving data adequacy of member economies is one of the key areas for further improving the quality of our surveillance products. The experience in Europe, as I explained 10 minutes ago, where the crisis started with the problem of data reporting by Greece, has also given emphasis to the importance of this task. Indeed, several member countries have requested for our office to help them improve their capacity for producing macroeconomic and financial statistics, in particular balance of payments statistics. As a part of our efforts to further improve the quality of surveillance products, our office has started the feasibility study for establishing our own framework to provide technical assistance to member countries. The third challenge is for us is the continue to explore the measures to enhance the CMIM. Taking the size of the CMIM, for example, it closely related to the reality of the global economy, how much capital flows, the monetary policies of advanced economies, and macroeconomic policy in the region, and also the foreign reserve as a self-defense. So it is just like an insurance. In order to protect yourself against fire or automobile accidents, if you keep cash at hand, it's so costly. That's the reason why that we created the certain insurance. This CMIM is also the insurance, but how much the amount of cover is appropriate is the endless question we have to answer to ourselves, depending on the, as I said, the reality of the global economy and the financial market. Another way of enhancing the financial capacity of the CMIM would be to use local currency in extending financial support under the CMIM. Apparently, this can be done without increasing the size of the USD holdings as a reserves, while posing question of its effectiveness. Finally, let me briefly touch one issue that needs to be discussed in a medium to long-term horizon. Under the current CMI mechanism, members are obliged to exchange letters of commitment to provide actual USD liquidity support or swap line when CMIM is actually activated. But the exchange of letters of commitment itself does not involve any lending or borrowing of the USD between members, and no USD is centrally pooled under the current CMI system for its activation. This is consistent with the agreement in 2007 to have a self-managed reserve pooling arrangement instead of a centrally pooling system. While this system has a merit in producing efficiency in reserve management, central pooling of a certain portion of USD holding could enhance assurances of financial support under this mechanism and contribute to quicker provision of the USD liquidity. The benefit of central pooling will increase if accumulate experience in activation of the CMIM. I think that this issue would warrant attention and consideration by member countries in the medium to long-term horizon. As I mentioned at the outset, I was invited to give a speech about this Chiang Mai initiative by Princeton University's Woodall School 13 years ago. I commented on the slow progress, but at that time, in regional surveillance, which was a challenge the region had to address in order to give its regional framework teeth. I use that word, teeth. I observed that the governments in the region have not done much to promote and enhance the policy dialogue process. They are not capable of defining their own policy conditions for swaps, nor has a permanent institution been established. Today, I stand before you, and I'm very pleased to report that the authorities have successfully set up its own permanent institution to this end. I would like to qualify, though, that my appointment as a director is just a coincidence and not because of my speech 13 years ago. Amro is now a reality and enjoy the strong support of members legally, financially, and in terms of human resources. Authorities' commitment and support to our office has been overwhelming and spurred us to accelerate our efforts to sharpen our surveillance analysis and to better support this mechanism design and strategy in view of the evolving global economic challenges. Over the last 4 years, we have tried our best to give this teeth to regional macroeconomic surveillance. It is true that we have received very critical comments from member authorities from time to time. It has certainly brought about more lively policy discussion among policymakers and hopefully contributed to prevention of crisis. It is therefore important for the authorities to continue studying the long-term agenda of our office and the CMIM. The road ahead will not be easy, but I have confidence that the authorities will be able to tackle this issue effectively. The good progress made since 2009 is a testimony to their dedication and determination to strengthen the resilience of the ASEAN+3 region and to ensure strong, sustainable growth and prosperity for all. Before concluding, I would like to once again state that the findings, interpretations, and conclusions expressed in my speech represent my personal views. Thank you very much.